My name's Damian Curry. I'm the technical director for the Community Alliances team at NGINX, where I just kind of head up all things technical when it comes to our ecosystem partners and our community outreach and all that fun stuff.
Awesome. And I am Melissa McKay. I am working with JFrog right now as a developer advocate, and my concern is for the community, making sure that we're getting the right information out there, that we are sharing best practices, things like that. Prior to JFrog, I was a developer, so very much involved in software development and delivery for over 20 years, mostly Java server-side projects. So my heart is on the developer side of things. All right, let's talk about this problem that both you and I are aware of. This problem where in software development and delivery, we build this stuff, we cobble together these pipelines, and then we throw it out there into production. And then there is this high level theory of how this should be done and best practices that should be in place. But when it comes down to implementation, we run into various issues because of our various different types of projects and different circumstances that they're in. So I'd love to do this joint effort with you, Damian. And it sounds like your team has a really good starting point for us. Do you want to
Yeah.
introduce us to that?
Yeah, so our team at NGINX has been working on something that ended up being called MARA, which is the modern or what is it? The modern application reference architecture. I swear I've done this before. But yeah, and it kind of grew a little organically, and it kind of started as, trying to solve a specific problem, and, we were trying to define what is a modern application. And, the more we looked, the more we found that there are a lot of, thoughts on it, right? You go out and there's a lot of people that say, oh, here's our reference architecture. And then you click on it and it's a lot of words and a couple pretty pictures, and that's about it. And, maybe if they even do have like a demo, you can't see how it's actually done. It's probably, written, built by hand, very bespoke. And there just weren't any really good examples that could be a hands-on tool to kind of get somebody started. So what we decided to do, and luckily we have a great team that has a diverse background. So we have people who are from Melissa's background doing the application development, and then we also have people who are kind of more on my side, coming from the operations, sysadmin, DevOps, platform architects, whatever you want to call it. And we kind of sat down and started going, well, why don't we build one? And why don't we get to finally do the fun thing of being able to go, I want to build a production ready, quote unquote, system, but without having that pesky thing of actually putting it in production. So it gave us a chance to be able to run through and kind of build this example of, an easy to spin up Kubernetes infrastructure. So it's all turnkey. You can just run some scripts. It will provision a Kubernetes cluster in a cloud provider, and then it will deploy all of those other tools. Because one of the things we've found we like to talk about is, it's almost like the application is what everybody focuses on, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Underneath that, there's so many other moving pieces that if you're not, deeply embedded in that world, you just don't think of, right? You got to figure out log management and certificate management and, the actual infrastructure this is all running on. And, where do you put your metrics, and how do you do all of this? And also, how do you build it in a repeatable way where you're not beholden to what your original decisions were? Because what was the best choice you could do when you were first building something usually isn't the best choice a year down the road. And I know I've done it to myself, and you end up, when you're first building it, everything's intertwined. So then you go back and you go, oh, I need to replace this one chunk, and all of a sudden it's this huge project. So we're really focusing on the modular pluggability to go, and we ran into it ourselves. We went, okay, let's use Elk Stack for logging. Well, we started running into problems with Elk Stack, but because we had started with this thought process of we want to make everything pluggable, it was really easy to go back and just go, okay, well, we're just going to take out Elk Stack and let's play with Loki for a little while and see how that works. Or let's play with, we worked with Sumo Logic to build an integration too. So having just the ability to pull these pieces in and out, and that was really interesting. But then we kind of hit this wall where we're like, okay, well, that's the infrastructure part. And then, as we've been talking more and more with Melissa and everybody at JFrog, there's this huge piece missing, and it's the exact same, really similar issue from the infrastructure side in the CI/CD side and in that deployment automation. And you have the same thing you run into where it's, there's a lot of theory and going, yeah, you can do all this cool stuff, but because it has to be kind of bespoke for your application, there really aren't any good examples. So, we were thinking it would be awesome to put something together that kind of, marries this project with a new one and be able to actually show like, hey, it's not something you're going to copy and paste into production, but it's a starting point. It's something to go, oh, that's how you do it, right? And just to like kind of make that little connection in your brain. And, one of the main things we've been thinking about a lot of this is with our reference architecture, and I'm hoping with this next one we're kicking off here, we're always trying to build that thing that I would be excited to stumble across when I'm trying to solve a problem. And just have that thing where you go, oh man, that's how you do it. And just, even if it's not 100%, if you get 75%, you just made somebody's day. And, being able to put something out there that will hopefully stop somebody from banging their head into a wall for too long, I think it's a great thing to be able to do.
You touched on a ton of subjects here that are near and dear to my heart too, because I know that especially, way back as a junior developer, I remember having these problems, right? I didn't really know exactly how to implement something. I had an idea, but I wasn't sure how to do it. And going out and looking for resources on that, you're likely going to fall onto the simplest thing that works, which may not be production worthy, right? It might not be something that is safe to use for your production environment, depending on your circumstances. And that's pretty typical. Mm-hmm. A lot of these examples and demos that are out there, that's what their purpose is just give you the basics on how to start something up and how to get something up and running. But there's always this caveat that you need to dive a little deeper to really understand what's going on, to make sure that you are doing it safely and sometimes even just more efficiently, right?
Well, more efficiently, and just taking advantage of the options that you just maybe didn't know existed. Like
exactly.
I can't even count the number of conversations I've had with people where you're like, oh, well, why don't, you could just do this. And they're like, wait, you can do that? And it's like, oh yeah, it's default behavior, right? And it's just being able to show that. And, instead of kind of taking the opposite approach, instead of doing the most bare minimum, like, hey, let's do something that's really fancy, right? And that, maybe is overly automated for what you would actually want in production, but just to show the possibilities and what could be done if you're, brave enough or stupid enough, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, there is that measure of risk taking that we need to be able to do in order to improve ourselves and our projects and be able to push ourselves forward. I'm really excited about this, Damian, because I know we're all very much aware that there are different stages that you go through, that software goes through all the way up to production. But I've always been on that first the left side of things, for example. I mean, considering I'm a developer and that's my expertise, I'm very concerned with CI/CD. I'm concerned with managing your dependencies, building images appropriately, things like that. But once it goes out to production, that is something that is, not so close to my expertise. So I really think that we make a good match as far as making sure that we can show something all the way from beginning to end, so that once something is out in production, you can get all of that feedback that you need and feed that back into the beginning of your cycle again. It's continuous improvement for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, exact same thing goes for me, right? I don't know that world of writing the application and doing that prep work. I just know when it got tossed over the wall to me, and I went, oh man, now I got to figure out how to do this in production, right? So it's great to be able to work. And really, I think one of the other things that it's really powerful as well is kind of trying to break down those silos. And it's, I always remember it was always the joke. It was the, sysadmins versus the network admins, or the, sysadmins versus the developers. And it's like, hey, we're all trying to get to the same goal here. And, if you stop and, instead of going, what was always the joke? It was, oh, you need to make your code more efficient. And it's like, well, no, you just need to give me more resources for my code to run on, right? And instead of going, oh, hey, you know what? If we actually work together and figure this out, we can collaborate and make everybody's life better.
Yes, we are all on the same team.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a really cool project because I mean, I work for JFrog. I'll take what I've learned from there and from my background. You're with NGINX and F5. You can take what you've learned there. We're going to combine these skills and we're going to come up with something great. One other thing I wanted to bring in and talk about is I've been working a lot with the Continuous Delivery Foundation,
Yeah.
and we have a special interest group that is all concerned about interoperability. And some of the things that you said earlier about, making sure that you aren't, necessarily so committed to a particular path or maybe even a particular tool that you can, make things pluggable and make things more flexible. That's something I think is super important. A lot of these solutions, I think we struggle a little bit, especially when we're trying to come out with, community oriented best practices.
Hmm.
We don't want to say, like this tool is better than that tool. I think we
Exactly.
all have this understanding that everything was made for its own purpose. Everything has
Yeah.
its own pros and cons. Something that might work for you just fine might not work for someone else. So I think this whole idea of interoperability is super important, making sure that we don't have such tight integrations that we
Hmm.
can't move or we paint ourselves into a corner, so to speak.
Exactly. I think it was one of the people on my team made the comment where it's protocols, not products, right? As much as we love to talk about the products, like I said, what you pick, what's the best solution now isn't the best solution in hell, 6 months, 5 months, like anytime. As soon as something goes into production, everything goes sideways, right? And, or maybe you end up with a situation where you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to use this database technology for my application because it's all I need. Well, then another team goes, oh, there's already a database out there. I'm just going to use that instead of deploying my own. And now all of a sudden you're like, well, I didn't choose this database for multi-users and now it doesn't work for us. And now we need to migrate, and having to, re-architect from scratch. I mean, nobody wants to do that.
Right.
But yeah, just having that maintainability and, just being able to adapt because things change, right? Like
Yeah.
our goals change, our focuses change, the amount of traffic you have even, right? Like it's kind of the best problem that you want to have, right? Is, oh man, I'm overloaded because everybody wants to use our, whatever we built. And then you have to be able to adapt to keep up and just to, make everything work.
Yep, totally makes sense. On the other side of things, and I think you touched on this earlier as well, we have this field where there's a lot of high thinking about how all of this should work. But then when it comes down to actual implementation, I mean, you have to choose something, right? You got
Hmm.
to start somewhere. So I think this is a great opportunity to kind of, give everyone a window looking in to see exactly what we're going to go through when we pick and choose the tools that we do and
Hmm.
see how it goes and see what kinds of decisions we're going to have to make, the evaluations that we do afterward, and maybe make some changes. This is going to be good.
Yeah,
I'm
and I really hope we can have more of these conversations, right? It's, I'm all about transparency, right? And telling war stories as we joke about, right? Nobody, it's when everything went perfectly, that's never interesting. Like we want to hear about, when did you screw it up? How did you fix it,
right.
right? Like that's where you really learn things. You don't learn from getting everything right the first try. You learn from making mistakes and by, trying to figure out a solution to them. And I love to be able to hear the stories and I love telling them too. So hopefully we'll have some good ones that'll come out of this.
I'm sure we will. We have a lot of history that we can chat about as we're working through this stuff. And hopefully doing this will, help someone else learn from our experience too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I've learned so much from random people you don't know on the internet, right? Of just, whether it's, Stack Overflow or forums or, anything like that. And, you're very rarely going to find that like, oh, this is the exact thing I want, but I got 50%. I can make up the rest, right? And with that starting point, then you can kind of go, oh, okay, I get the theory now. And now I can just kind of tweak this and apply it to what I need to do better.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to take this to my team and we're going to start discussing some of the details around here. I'm going to pull up Mara, take a look at
Yeah.
that project, and see where we can get started and work on some of the details.
Yeah, I'm excited to get going. We're really looking forward to it.